Ever since that, the intellectual attack on the people of Bharat has been relentless. Colonization is as mental as it is physical because they broke us mentally before capturing us physically. And they left us physically because they knew that they have us captured mentally and that physical occupation is not going to give them a lot more benefit. When physical colonization ends, the population is left so poor. They're left with literally a begging bowl. Colonial mentality is another mentality that stops people from taking initiatives because taking initiative is number one to succeeding. I think the word colonization has also been appropriated a lot to only attribute it to British occupation of India, but also the Mughal occupation of India was colonization because it was subjugation of people, forceful conversion, conversion of also places of worship of Hindus. So it was a forceful takeover and a forceful attempt to introduce a culture which was foreign here and the people weren't accepting out of their free will. So that was also a period of colonization, and the first sort of colonial act that to be ever committed in our world was the distortion of the very word Hindu, the identity that the people of Bharatvarsh took pride in. Even today, I think the very concept of Hindu Rashtra is very, very misguided. It is taken as religious supremacy. It is not religious supremacy. It's that of an identity of people who come from one region. It's their culture. It's who they are. It's a point of identity that they take a lot of pride in. It is mrug. It is not, it was basically tail which was shrunk to mrug. So it was a word that was magnanimous, which everybody took pride in, and which was eventually shrunk to a very little word. That is being weaponized to say that, okay, whatever these people say, it's not about that. Ever since that, the intellectual attack on the people of Bharat has been relentless. Because to break this nation, it had to break the very people who took pride in their identity and who were all together. Because I think pride is what gives you, and a sense of identity is what gives you a sense of belonging and the will to fight for somewhere you belong. The only way you can defend yourself is when you truly believe in what you're defending. But when that belief goes away from you, that's when you truly stop believing in, whatever you want to, fight for. And let me tell you, this is in no way a cultural supremacy battle or, okay, we need to fight this to establish what identity. It's not a matter of self-respect or ego or anything. It is also how the marketplaces are placed, unfortunately. Our marketplaces are only placed and lauded over by people who have this kind of identity surety. The people who do not, that point is consistently used against them in marketplaces. I can give you a very recent example of that of Chandrayaan 3. So when Chandrayaan 3 happened, people tried to deride us. I don't know if you followed this news reporting online. There was British news which was consistently saying that, okay, this is a poor country that needs to allocate its money in building toilets and not in sending missions to space, that they need to allocate their funds better. Firstly, it was not a splurge. The budget of Chandrayaan was very little. I think it was less than the money that was put into the movie Interstellar and some big budget Bollywood films that we know. And another thing is that the moon mission is not just a mission to say, okay, we went there first. It's also an exploration mission for helium, which is considered the future source of power. China wanted to go there first because it's, billions of tons of helium that's going to be mined, and whoever has the first mover advantage is essentially going to be the gatekeeper of these resources, who's going to charge the other countries for the rest of their lives. So it is a way to also lord over your marketplace, to remain rich and prosperous. The West has consistently attacked the identity and the self-respect of indigenous people and the East to keep them poor. It is not just a way to keep their culture, subjugated. It is a way, colonization, the mental colonization that we talk about, that we need to seriously decolonize, is also a way to keep the poor poor. It's a way to tell the Indians that, okay, don't do Chandrayaan, don't go to the moon, because you're better off staying poor for the rest of your life. But they do it by saying, okay, you don't have the necessity to go there because you're a still developing whatever country. They do not want us to make that leap, which will make us self-reliant, which will make us secure in our own skin, and which might one day make us the gatekeepers to millions of dollars, billions of dollars of resources, and us the richest people. I mean, Saudi, for instance, went from rags to riches because of oil, because of exploration and discovery of oil. Helium is supposed to be the next big thing. What is to say that India not getting that access actually makes it a superpower? Decolonization and colonization of ideas, this intellectual warfare, it is simply not this cultural superiority match that it is made into. It is just a facade used to keep the poor, keep the East subjugated, and from rediscovering the identity that made them so prosperous once upon a time. And that is something that I think we need to understand fundamentally when we fight for these things, when we fight these battles, when we try to understand what is happening around the world, when we try to understand decolonization and colonization. Colonization is also considered to be, a very physical occupation of a land. I think that is another, mundane construct. I think colonization is as mental as it is physical, because they broke us mentally before capturing us physically, and they left us physically because they knew that they have us captured mentally, and that physical occupation is not going to give them a lot more benefit. When they came here, they had to keep us by force because they had to mentally colonize us. But when they were successful, they left because they thought, okay, no matter what, the Indians are still going to do our BPO jobs because they're so colonized. It's not going to matter. The education system is still something that is going to bring out generations of Indians thinking that they are lesser people. So that was the single biggest, sort of achievement of colonization, something that we're still trying to shed ourselves and break our own chains from. And I think here a lot of us might have this question that, 1947 we got our independence. How come it's taking us so long to kind of leave all of these, chains of colonization behind? Why are we talking about this now? Why are we talking about decolonization now? We should have talked about this a long time ago. There is a very popular theory that it takes 3 generations post-colonization to completely break away from chains of colonization. Because when physical colonization ends, the population is left so poor, they're left with literally a begging bowl, that the first generation post-colonization, which might be our grandparents, looking at, the contemporary age here, I'm assuming we are, in our 20s and our 30s, so our grandparents were the ones who were fighting to put food on the table. So they couldn't think about, okay, what does the West say about us, or what does the West think about us, or what our education system says about us. They were just not in that condition to do that. The second generation, which was our parents' generation, they were fighting to bring in stability, to put a roof on the table, to put a roof on the heads, to put, basic necessities, education, to make sure that you have a stable, life. I think it's up to us now. It's the third generation, which is born with food security, which is born with security of having a roof over their heads, that can finally engage in these conversations of, what decolonization means to us, what our identity really means to us, what does it truly mean to be independent in our thought, in our skin, and in our country, and how do we project this to the world in a way that will then bring our country to number 1. Because like I said, this is not a shouting match to say we are the superior culture. This is literally the race to become the most successful country out there, because nobody who, has pride in who they are, or who truly believe in the things that they have, can succeed out there. Because if we have that colonial mentality, we will rely on other countries to have a successful space mission, thinking it's not for us, because it's something we do not take pride in. We think, this is what we are worth. We are worthy of being, following. We are worthy of doing BPO jobs. We are worthy of doing second things to the Western world. That feeling of lesser than the West is what I think is the need for decolonization, and the need that will ultimately put us, at number 1 position out there in the world. I had a very personal, experience with the whole decolonization experience, like the whole thing. I think decolonization is a very big buzzword right now out there in the world. Everybody talks about it. Even in the West, it's a huge word. William Gladstone's, successor went to Georgetown University in Guyana, and he said, we need to decolonize the world. I'm sorry, my ancestors were employed in slavery, so and so. So there's some conversation about decolonization happening in the West as well. And I think this is something that we need to be very aware of as well. I ran for president at the University of Oxford. So a little bit of background here. I'm from Udupi. I come from a very small town on the coastal belt of Karnataka. Born and raised there all my life. And then I applied to the University of Oxford thinking, okay, it's ranked 1 in the world. Let me go there. Let me study. Let me get a degree. And it was at a point where I thought, okay, I don't know anybody who's gone to Oxford, because every time you fill in an application, you try to refer it to people who've been there, right? ನಾನು ಈ ಅಪ್ಲಿಕೇಶನ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ, ನೀನು ಸಹ ತುಂಬಿಸಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಹೇಳಲ್ಲ ಹೇಗೆ ಬರೆಯೋದು ಅಂತ. ವಿ ಡೂ ದ್ಯಾಟ್, ರೈಟ್? ವಿ ಟ್ರೈ ಟು ರೀಚ್ ಔಟ್ ಟು alumni, we try to reach out to uncles and aunts and cousins who might have gone there, or like distant friends. I had nobody. So it was how impossible the dream was for me. But I think being young means being recklessly optimistic. You can afford to be recklessly optimistic, because it will make for great stories in the future, saying, oh, I tried for it. Because people will appreciate you for doing it. There's no shame in failing when you're young. And I think it's perfect time for you guys to be recklessly optimistic. And reckless optimism is what got me to apply there in the first place. And I got in. And that really brought full circle the whole saying, shoot for the moon, if you miss, you'll land among the stars. So I think as young people, as the young, this thing of Bharat, this is definitely something that we can afford to do. Maybe the education system tells us that, we are not worthy of it. We are not worthy of being number one or anything. But I think we are, and it's up to us to find inspiration for it from society, from beyond our textbooks, from literature that's being put there by, countless good faith actors of our country, and then find it out for ourselves. Okay, so I landed in Oxford, and then I'm like, okay, taking initiative is another thing. I think colonial mentality is another mentality that stops people from taking initiatives, because taking initiative is number one to succeeding. Even to do Chandrayaan, you have to take initiative, and we will do it. We see in society that people do not want to speak out. If something's happening out in the street, everybody will like, namge yake, seedha manege hoga, aitappa, yakappa, yake. So that's a very strong sentiment that we have. And very often, I think as young people, we misdirect our anguish to our own culture, saying that, ayo, this is Bharatiya culture, na yaru matadalla, we don't take initiative anta. But that's not Bharatiya culture. Bharatiya culture was all about, leading revolutions when you didn't like things you were seeing. It was all about fighting back. It was colonization that made us slaves to this whole mentality that namge yakappa. Because countless generations were forced to think that during occupation, during subjugation, during the loot that rendered them absolutely poor. So I think taking initiative is another decolonial point that we all need to do as young people. And it is something I think you already are doing by, subscribing to this whole program, because I'm sure nobody wants to go through 9 to 5 classes or jobs and then 5 to 8 do something like this. You must be mad to be doing this. You're not mad, you're just decolonized. You want to do something beyond, you want to take initiative. And I think that is another point, taking initiative. Take initiative everywhere. If you think there's no leader somewhere, stand up and, show that leadership which is so lacking. And I think that is also the road to rediscovering self-respect, self-identity, and, taking this country forward in that decolonial structure. For me, I think leadership was very important. Since my kindergarten, I remember being like, oh, nan class leader agbeku, na class monitor agtene. Since it was way back in kindergarten. And I took the same mentality to Oxford as well. And in Oxford, I see, okay, the student union is very prestigious. There's no Indian leader. Let me stand, because I think that's how you set example, right? You stand for election, so maybe 10 years down the line, somebody might win the election. So you have this whole idea. So I was like, okay, let me give my name. I was discouraged a lot by fellow Indians, saying that, ayo, neene hakappa, maryade hogtade, onde vote siktade, neene ning vote hakkolbeku, yaru ning vote kadalla. So that was this huge debate that went on and on and on. But I was like, hey, I don't care. I really don't care. Not being self-aware is also, I think, is important of, people's opinions, people's comments, people demeaning. Because that's what literally the British and so many other, colonizers did to India. They demeaned us, saying you're backward people, saying you people are not civilized, and that we came and civilized you. This is a very popular rhetoric, by the way. They say colonization was positive experience for the indigenous people, because we came and we civilized you people. We gave you the railways. We taught you how to wear a shirt and a pant, and then, we taught. They literally try to teach us, treat us like we were Karjanru, and then our Bandantra, suddenly we had everything. We were like, oh wow, like jig, jig, jig. So that's how they try to portray it. And that mentality, by the end of the day, carries on to us as a society as ಬೇರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಬಗ್ಗೆ. It is that colonial mentality again. We care so much about what others say. Because the British kept deriding us. They keep deriding us. The West keeps deriding us every time we do anything. I think the first Chandrayaan mission was that literal cartoon that turned up in The Guardian, I think, where a man with a cow is trying to, knock on the doors of the elite space club. So that is literally the mentality which is so ingrained in us that we care what people think about us. And I didn't care what people thought about me, and I think you shouldn't too. And that is another point of decoloniality that we need to imbibe in our own lives, because decolonization is not this huge elephant which is out there on display that we all need to go and tackle. It is ingrained in our own lives. It is a subconscious mentality that we have as descendants of a great civilization that was subjugated for a very long time. And we are not the first civilization that actually went through something like this. The Chinese also went through something like this. There's this very interesting book called Three Daughters. So it spans three daughters, in three different era of Chinese, this thing. So the Chinese were also colonized by the Japanese, just like how Indians were by British and before that. And the Japanese did horrible things to Chinese people. The women, the children. It's a horrible past. But the Chinese, you know what they say? We are a great people. This shouldn't have happened to us. So we do not acknowledge this at all. They say that this did not happen to us at all. They're so sure in their identity and self-respect that they deny the fact that they were subjugated, and that is the mentality that they approach decolonization with. They're like, this didn't happen to us because we are so great. And look at us. We're like, ಅವ್ರು ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಇವ್ರು ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ನಾವು ಯಾಕೆ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು, ಇದೇನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. We have soaked it into our subconscious level instead of, pretending like, no, we are a great people. We were 43%, 44% of the world's GDP. No, we are a great people. This didn't happen to us. Let's pretend like it didn't. We're on our way to number one. You don't get to tell us that we can't do this. ನಮ್ಗೆ ಯಾಕಪ್ಪ, ನಾನು ಯಾಕೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, you can't say this to me. So we need to have that mentality. We need to have that attitude. That is decolonization by the end of the day. It's not this huge thing that we combat by writing articles, by writing, of course that is also part of the deal, but it's not just that. It's also something I think each one of us can do in our own lives. It's something that we can do in our friends circle. When someone tries to take initiative, support them, be there for them, tell them they can do it, or encourage your own fellow people to do it. Like truly be there as proud people who think they can, actually go conquer the South Pole of the moon and beyond. Have that mentality in you. So coming back to Oxford. So I won the election as well. So it was again, shooting for the moon, landing in the stars kind of a situation. And I ran on this whole platform of decolonization. And now you might wonder, like, okay, the West is so intent on being colonized. How come they supported the word colonization, like decolonization? How come they voted for you for decolonization? You might have this question because, okay, they are the colonizers. Why would they support a candidate who's saying decolonization? I think credit to us. Indians have been so successful across the world that now it has become increasingly impossible for them to deny the fact that decolonization was more of a negative thing. They're kind of forced to say things like, okay, we apologize for slavery, we apologize for this, we apologize for that. It's not because they've suddenly grown a conscience. It's not suddenly because ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಅನ್ಸ್ತು, oh, slavery was bad ಅಂತ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಅನ್ಸಿಲ್ಲ. It's because we have empowered us to a level, ourselves to a level that they're forced to acknowledge this point. Very recent debate on decolonization was the apology for slavery, which I think William Gladstone's great-great-great-grandson, he was a British Prime Minister, his great-grandson made in the Georgetown University in Guyana. And everybody was like, wow, this guy is saying slavery was bad. I'm like, excuse me, the Guyanese president is a person of Indian origin. The Guyanese president for 2 terms has been Bharat Jagdev. He's this literal child of an indentured labor who was taken from India to work in the plantations of Guyana. When you're talking at a university in a country whose head of state is an indentured labor, initiative of people saying slavery was bad. But I think it's very early for us to forgive them so easily, because I think coming from our country, our culture, we forgive everybody very easily, and then we forget as if, nothing has happened. I think that's bad, and that is not something that we should do so readily when so much is at stake. I experienced this myself because I ran on a platform of decolonization colonization, and they loved it. They were like, wow, brown person saying decolonization at Oxford. This is amazing. This is representation. The minute I won and I was like, okay, let's change the syllabus, people were like, no. That's not happening. This is about where we go. As long as you want to be a showpiece on the table, saying, okay, we're doing so much to change things, we're okay. But the minute you want to change the world order, people are going to have a problem. People are going to actively oppose it. We love the fact that Rishi Sunak is Prime Minister. But the minute he made that Cambridge speech, you saw how that Goldberg person came out saying, oh my God, like 2 million gods, what is this guy doing as Prime Minister of this country? Where have we come from Churchill's great era? That we are a great people and we've come to this. So they derided him, irrespective of how much he's contributing to their economy and their government, and saving literally their drowning government. So it's I think, very ironic about how carefully we need to associate ourselves with the white man's rhetoric as well, because they never have our best interests at their heart, because it's all about marketplaces for them by the end of the day. So they're going to come at us intellectually with everything they can, So we cannot rely upon them to grow a conscience, apologize for what they've done, and give back all the money that they've looted. It is up to us to write our stories. It is up to us to reclaim things, and it is up to us to grow a spine and fight for it. Because they will use every ledge that they can to go back to how things were by packaging it in a very nice way. I think packaging is also something that we've seen increasingly happen greatly in our society. People speak about feminism, but they can't seem to acknowledge straight cases of patriarchy out there. People talk about human rights violation only as long as it's convenient for them to talk about it. The minute there's an actual human rights violation, they're like, oh no, we can't talk about this. Nobody wants to talk about the Hindus in Pakistan who've gone from like 13% to now 1%, less than 1%. Nobody wants to talk about it as a genuine human rights violation.